Well, hello there and good day. Thank you so much for joining me at Dystopian Report, the place where we talk about the nightmare world we have found ourselves living in. I'm your host, Jesse Pullman, and today is Thursday, January 1st, 2026. It is about 8:30 p.m. EDT as I'm making this video. First off, Happy New Year. If you haven't already or you're new and you like what we do, you find you like what we do by watching this video, of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with a friend. We hit 100 subscribers this year, so we're going to be doing Terminator 0 at some point during this year. With that said, if you saw our special 10 dystopian news threads going into 2026 video, you remember that we mentioned the capital of Iran, Tehran, running low on water is a challenge that Iran is presented with. I was in our environmental section. We didn't go too deep into that, but we did mention that that was a problem. Well, in the past week or two, the government of Iran has been faced with a different problem, its own people. Here we go. According to people claiming they are part of the resistance against tyranny, they really want this story told. They want people talking about it. They want outside people making other outside people aware that it's going on. So here I am. There isn't much I can do, but I can do this, so I'm doing it. You find something you can do to help people being oppressed, you do that too. So first off, a disclaimer. I want to say up front that I am far from a specialist in Iranian history and culture. I know some things. There's a lot I don't know. I'm going to take you through some reporting that's out there on the current story, but I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. Even if I did, Iran's history leading up to the 1979 revolution and its time as the Islamic Republic is extremely complicated and contested. Besides a quick Wikipedia read, which is always just a surface level, get the gist thing, I recommend Marjan Satrapi's autobiographical graphic novel, Persepolis. I'm saying it's all wrong, but, we're already a minute into the video. We're not restarting it. The bottom line is that the Iranian world is very different than ours, and is very closed off to foreign media. While hints of this story have been bleeding through for the past week, today seems to have been a day where the guardrails came off and things escalated explosively. Literally, explosively, as Molotov cocktails are reported to be a street tool. So with that in mind, let's start with one of the sources I often recommend on this channel, Mark Chadbourne. We'll then read an article he recommended by The Atlantic's Arash Azizi, followed by an article with some maps from the Institute of War. Okay? Okay. So, this is Mark Chadbourne's thread on Iranian opposition leader Reza Pahlavi. I'm saying this wrong. The eldest son of the last Shah. The Shah was basically a king. He was a dictator. He was not a great guy. But Reza Pahlavi, the son, I'm told he's very pro-democracy and not a monarchist. But he's also the son of the monarch. So just, I don't know. This is one of the things I personally I don't know what the guy believes. I don't know if he's forthright. I don't know. He has a message for his people, a my fellow countrymen type thing, saying that victory is ours. So he's basically calling for people to come out into the streets. That's fine. That's great. There'll be a link to this thread in the description, by the way. So if you see me skipping through some parts, you can read it yourself at your own leisure. I'm one to always try to put my sources in the description of a video. So, protesters have set fire to the police building in Farsan. Protesters have set fire to a statue of Qasem Soleimani in the city of Lali in Khuzestan. I think Qasem Soleimani is the current or former Supreme Ayatollah. I don't know. I'm not sure who he is. I know the name. I don't know who he is off the top of my head. Security forces have opened fire on unarmed protesters in Hamadan. A video message from one of the protesters says, "This is a war zone. The Islamic Republic's real war is against us, the people of Iran." According to and I might butcher this, I'm sorry, Abdurrahman Borman's Center's monitoring, the execution rate in Iran has reached its highest level in 30 years and is more than twice that of last year. Escalating. Protesters are now armed with Molotov cocktails and setting Basij, that's like a paramilitary police, forces ablaze. It's like the moral police. Like if you're doing something they consider immoral, that you deal with the Basij. I'm pretty sure that's who they are. I could be mixing them up. As an aside, there are virtually no Western journalists operating within Iran. They've all been banned. The BBC can't get a correspondent in. So basically the only thing is if information from inside gets out, that's what we're going with here. So then there's good analysis of the Iranian situation and why the protesters need to have a plan for what comes next if they're going to succeed. It's the Atlantic article we're going to read now. So Iranians have had enough. Demonstrations erupting across the Islamic Republic reflect deep economic and political discontent. By Arash Azizi. Just for reference, he's a contributing writer at The Atlantic. His book, What Iranians Want, Women, Life, Freedom, was published in January 2024. He is a visiting fellow at Boston University's Frederick S. Pardee Center for the Study of Longer Range Future. It's an interesting department. I want to work for them. Okay, so we're going to skim through this article together, but I'm going to link the article in the description for you to be able to read yourself at your leisure. I encourage you to always double check me. I encourage you to always be like, hey, Jesse might be wrong. So, the immediate spark for the protest was a sharp decline in the value of the Iranian currency. At one point last week, a US dollar traded for almost 1.5 million reals, having lost more than half its value in a year. As recently as 2021, a dollar cost around 250,000 reals, and only a decade ago, around 30,000. This continuous decline has slashed savings, destroyed the Iranian middle class, and inflicted real suffering on the working classes. The protests began on Sunday with merchants who rely on importing electrical goods and find very few can afford them. But they quickly mushroomed, as did previous rounds in 2017, 2019, and 2022. So they've been having these street protests for a decade almost now. Probably longer if you look further back. And it's just a thing. It's spread to cities in provinces such as Hamadan, Isfahan, and Loristan, and drawing in students, pensioners, and members of Gen Z. Remember, the Gen Z protests are a thing. I wonder if we'll see any One Piece flags. You think I'm kidding, but I'm not. So, protesters have chanted death to the dictator, targeting the octogenarian, that's 80s. He's in his 80s. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who's held the top post since 1989 with little accountability. So, they're against the system. Iran's president, who you think would be the most powerful person in the country, but isn't even the second most, is Masoud Pezeshkian. I think I'm close. And he was elected with promises of good governance last year. He's overseen electricity and water cuts while failing to realize signature promises such as lifting restrictions on the internet. Gee, I wonder what kind of government restricts the internet. See also our segment on KOSA and other internet bills in our year-end special. So, wanting to show he's cut from different cloth than his heartland predecessor, Pezeshkian quickly promised to meet with representatives of protesters. His spokesperson affirmed the constitutional right of peaceful protest for Iranians. But Pezeshkian doesn't control the security forces, so these pronouncements ring hollow. Dozens have been arrested, including important people who were later released. There have been clashes between protesters and police. Okay. He did dismiss the central bank governor, who was appointed by a hardline predecessor. It's just interest. I'm thinking of the wrong word here. Inflation is crazy in Iran, basically, is the problem. Like, that's the spark of this all, is that inflation has gotten so bad that people can't afford things. And they're blaming the government. And while the government may try to hide behind the idea that, like, hey, the U.S. has sanctions and whatnot, that's not the whole story either. So, every time Iranians come out to the streets, many around the world express the wish that protesters can prevail against the Islamic Republic. Prominent American and Israeli politicians have already done so in the past few days, but as rattled as the regime might be, it's seen mass protests off repeatedly in recent years. In other words, it's not a steady regime, but it's stable enough that it's stayed in power for this length of time. And there are reasons for that, right? Like, they're just very powerful. They've got a lot of strength and can suppress information very quickly. Some protesters have chanted slogans in favor of Reza Pahlavi, Iran's exiled crown prince, but he's a divisive figure, and many reject his claim to leadership. This is kind of part of the problem, right? There's no unified resistance against the government, so resistance movements is one pops up, one gets whack-a-mole. One pops up, one gets whack-a-mole. They haven't built enduring networks either. Like I mentioned, how these protests are at least like a decade old. Well, there's been no through line of leadership there. There's been less of that, and that's, I mentioned again, Iran's execution rate is just through the roof. They're killing these people. That's why they haven't been able to build it. They haven't been able to build it because they're facing active opposition. This isn't like if they were too lazy to do it situation. This is like the regime disrupted them situation. Okay, and I wanted to look at the Iran update on the Institute of War's website just because it's got some top lines, but it's also got like this map here, which is interesting to me. It's 2 p.m. Eastern Time on December 31st, right? You've got protests in Tehran. You've got protests in some cities, but there are entire provinces without protests. So those places are pretty secure, and while I don't know the geography of what's in there and what's going on with them, the bottom line is that this is not enough to, like, overthrow a country unless they really capture the capital at this point. There's also just not a lot of information getting out. We don't know what's where. There are military changes taking place. Again, I'm going to link. This is a map of the general broad area. So you can kind of see how Iran is on the eastern flank of what we consider to be the Middle East, even though it's kind of a meh term for the place. But like, it's got a border with Iraq. It's got a border with Turkey. And those are its two main land borders to the west. It's got borders with Afghanistan. I think Pakistan, I'm not sure. They're not showing them over here when they probably should. Because the border with Afghanistan is very porous. People can get in and out through that pretty easily. Saudi Arabia does not love Iran, even though they've been better terms recently. Because Saudi Arabia is, I'm going to fuck this up, Sunni. And Iran is Shiite. So they're different sects of Islam. Actually, Saudi Arabia might be more Wahhabist than anything these days. I don't know, man. I'm not an expert on this area. I mean, like, I might know stuff about the Byzantine Empire a little bit, but that's up here. It was never really that much down here. Although it was Egypt. So, yeah. This will all be in the description. I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on sources that are dense, because density is the enemy of a quick understanding, and we're already 12 minutes into a video that's supposed to be a quick understanding. So now you know that there's unrest in Iran. You know what the unrest is about. You know that there are long-term and short-term factors going into it. You know the political opposition isn't unified. What can we do about it besides just sharing the news that this is going on? I know I say this all the time. Pressure your representatives to do ethical things, not to like send a land army into Iran thinking you're going to liberate them, not to do a bombing campaign, but to maybe do, like, I don't know, political support of some sort. What that is, what that looks like, is up to you to determine. I want to thank you all so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and you found it useful to your life, please hit the like, share, subscribe, friend, follow, or whatever buttons. Really does help the channel grow. It lets me know what you're watching so I can keep making more of it. And that really does matter on this channel, because I need to see this thing doing well in order to keep making stuff. And I've seen it doing well, so thank you all from the very bottom of my heart for being supportive. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always on this channel, pieces.